Hello again. It's Christmas Day, and I'm happy that you chose to spend some of your time today in the Cool Media Theater with me. I'm Adam, and this is WTF Cinema, where I look at the weirdest, unexpected, and uncalled for game adaptations of movies. Since today is Christmas, I'm pulling a huge lump of coal out of my stocking, and I'm looking at one of the biggest hits of the early 80s which really didn't need a game. Yep, today I'm looking at E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. Now I already hear you saying, "Hey Adam, I thought you said you weren't going to talk about this one." Well, I thought about it after watching the movie again and realized that it does qualify for the series. After all, when you get down to it, there really isn't much in the movie that could be worked into a game, especially back in 1982. The story, for the 3 or 4 millennials who hadn't seen it, is about an alien botanist who is accidentally stranded on Earth and befriends a little boy named Elliot, played by Henry Thomas, while he tries to get rescued by his people. It was one of Steven Spielberg's masterpieces, and the biggest movie hit of 1982, not because of its creature effects, which were amazing for the time even if some people think the title alien looks like a flaccid ding-a-ling, or because of intense action scenes, which don't exist except for 3 chase scenes in the whole movie. It was a success because the relationship between E.T. and Elliot's siblings to a lesser extent, just tugs at the heartstrings. It has the perfect mix of comedy and drama, and it still holds up for the most part. I say for the most part because some elements can bring up issues now. The Star Wars references get more than a little nuts, and it's hard to look at the girl Elliot has a crush on in the movie if you know that she'll grow up to be Miss July 89. Funny enough, seeing young Drew Barrymore isn't nearly as awkward. But like I said, the movie was the biggest hit of 1982, and Atari absolutely noticed. They spent $25 million, an absurd amount of money at the time, to get the license to make games based on the movie. However, the negotiations took so long that only 6 weeks remained to create the game and get it into stores in time for the Christmas shopping season. Atari tasked Howard Scott Warshaw to come up with a game, and here we are with the results. While Spielberg suggested a simple Pac-Man clone for an E.T. game, Warshaw had grander ambitions. He decided to make an adventure game that stayed true to the main thrust of the plot, E.T. phoning home and getting rescued by his people. The game is largely a scavenger hunt. You control the alien, and you fall down pits looking for the 3 pieces to his communicator that he'll use to call the rescue ship. Everyone likes to bitch about the pain of falling into pits and trying to levitate back out of them, but really the rage is overblown. While there are some points where it can be easy to fall back into the pits, I was able to escape easily enough a good 80% of the time. For me, the real issues were 2 things. First, it could be very hard to find the phone home site. See those symbols that pop up at the top of the screen? The fire button on the Atari joystick? Kids, this was back in the dark ages when video game controls only involved a stick and 1 button. Well, that button would activate a special power depending on the symbol at the moment. It could teleport to different screens, find the phone pieces, or most importantly, phone home. Well, every time the game is loaded up, those symbols are randomized, dropped in different spots each time. That can be problematic enough since E.T.'s energy is always counting down, but sometimes the game glitches to where the phone home site never shows up. Remember, the game was shoved out the door after only 6 weeks. There wasn't time for bug testing. More annoying were the human adversaries in the game. There are 3 humans who interact with E.T. in the game. Elliot can find phone pieces and save E.T. in certain cases. The scientist abducts E.T. and tries to drag him to the lab. Most infuriating, however, is the FBI guy who steals phone pieces and hides them again anytime he touches E.T. That part always pissed me off. That's why I still play Game Mode 3 to this day. Bye-bye, Fed. E.T. on the Atari 2600 is a bad game. It was rushed out the door nowhere close to finished. It has plenty of annoying elements and glitches, and it isn't the kind of pick-up-and-play game that people expected back in the 2600 era. However, many people, especially in the gaming press, like to name E.T. on the 2600 as the worst game ever made, the game that almost killed the whole industry single-handedly until Papa Nintendo saved the world. Well, I hate to break it to those people, but it is not the worst game ever made. And I can prove it. After all, how can a game be the worst ever made if it's not even the worst game in its own franchise? Okay, some of you are probably asking, what do you mean, franchise? Yeah, this was the first E.T. game, and it sure as shit wasn't the last. In fact, not counting mobile games, PC games, that obscure German game the Angry Video Game Nerd mentioned, or the segment in Universal Theme Park Adventures on the GameCube, there were 7 E.T. games. 7 official games. And I know you're not going to believe me, but a couple of them are even worse than the 2600 game. Well, since it's Christmas, I'm going to go through all of them. Don't worry, I have some Advil in my stocking. We pick up in 1983. Console gaming is going down the crapper, and not because of E.T. The crash was the result of too many publishers putting out too many games on too many consoles all at once, with most of said games being garbage. E.T. was nothing more than a scapegoat for the industry's general incompetence at the time. Okay? However, while the console market was failing, the home computer market was doing fine thanks to Apple, Commodore, and Atari. Well, since Atari paid so much for the E.T. license, why not put a game on their 8-bit computer line? This is E.T. Phone Home for the Atari XE. The premise of this game is the same as the 2600 Classic. Find the pieces to a communicator and get the titular alien home. There are some notable differences. First, the graphics and audio got a major bump up. The XE computer had the same capabilities as the 5200, resulting in sharper visuals with a larger color palette and even some speech. Then there are the changes to the gameplay. The player controls Elliot this time. He goes after the phone pieces while E.T. stands in the menu and dictates what piece to get. If Elliot runs or gets nailed by the feds, he loses pieces. After getting all the pieces required and bringing them to E.T., Elliot then has to escort the alien to the ship's landing zone. Great! An escort mission. Kill me now. E.T. Phone Home is a better game than the first one, but that's like saying eating the potato salad E.T. stuck his tongue in and threw on the floor is better than eating a freshly dissected frog. It could be seen as a precursor to stealth games, but Metal Gear came out a couple years later and is more worth playing now. The game is available for as little as $20 and works on any of Atari's computers, but it's barely more than a curiosity at this point. Well, that was it for E.T. games that released when the movie was new. The other 5 games I'll be talking about came out in 2001, in preparation for the release of the special edition of the movie, which came out for the 20th anniversary. Yeah, just like his buddy George Lucas was doing with the original Star Wars trilogy, Steven Spielberg decided he needed to re-release his blockbuster to theaters, with early 2000s CGI replacing the beloved animatronics. It is as bad an idea as you think it is. Fortunately, unlike his buddy George Lucas, when Spielberg released the special edition on DVD, he had both versions of the movie in the package, so the fans could choose which version they want to watch. See how easy that is, George? Now why couldn't you do that with Star Wars? The first 3 games I'll talk about were all released on the Game Boy Color, which was a stupid idea in and of itself. The system was already supplanted at that point by the Game Boy Advance. I don't think it would have been that much more expensive to make those games for the GBA. But I guess New Kid Co. thought there'd be no harm since GBA was backwards compatible anyway. So I guess I'll excuse that. What I won't excuse is that one of those Game Boy Color games, E.T. and the Cosmic Garden, is worse than the 2600 game. No, I'm not kidding. When I first learned of this game in my initial research, I had high hopes for it. A gardening sim featuring E.T. felt like the perfect angle. The movie only provided a glimpse of his species' botanical interests after all, and I like the idea of a game expounding on that element from the movie. Also, I thought it'd do in 2001 what Viva Pinata would do years later, provide a sim game that's easy to pick up for kids. I guess it's my fault that I had such lofty expectations because this game sucked in ways the 2600 game could only dream of. Cosmic Garden's aesthetic package is a mixed bag. The visuals are quite pleasant with bright colors and some very good animation, particularly for the title character. The different flowers that can be found, grown, and bred are all unique, as are the various planets that ET can travel to for specimens. The reason I said the aesthetics were mixed is because the sound is absolutely atrocious. Just listen to what comes on when the game is booted up. It's so blaring discordant, I found myself reaching for the mute button very quickly. And it's not just because it's 8-bit. I played a lot of 8-bit games with pleasant music. The sound effects are very basic but unobtrusive, so there's that. But now we get to the gameplay, and the reason I'd want to grind this game up to use as fertilizer. On the surface, the mechanics are very basic. Move the saplings to fertile soil, keep them watered, make sure they get enough light. Basic stuff for a gardening sim. Unfortunately, navigating through your gardening tools is a pain in the ass due to the interface, and the game doesn't pause while you're cycling through your equipment. Also, the babysitting for the plants gets absolutely annoying in record time. It seemed every time I turned around another of those damn icons was popping up. Oh, more water! Oh, more light! Shut up for a while! I have plants at my desk at work, and they're a hell of a lot more self-sufficient than that. However, the worst element in the game by far is the space slug. The space slug provides fertilizer for your plants, but it also tries to eat your plants as quickly as possible. The AI for that fucking slug is designed to piss you off. It is very adept at finding exactly the right route to get at your garden, and the game doesn't give you nearly enough stones or other objects to defend your flowers. Just getting through the first garden was a test of patience. For as many problems as the 2600 ET game had, I never really got mad at it, as the game was ridiculously rushed and standards for games at the time were much lower. ET in the Cosmic Garden doesn't have those excuses. It just sucks. It sucks at expanding on the movie's lore, and it sucks as a kid's first sim game. Throw this one in the compost heap. Next up is E.T. Escape from Planet Earth, also on the Game Boy Color. This one is a much simpler concept to work with than that mess of a garden sim. It's a puzzle game all about guiding E.T. through various mazes. The mazes never get too complicated, but they do consistently add new quirks to keep things fresh. Some have ice to slip on. Some have insects and other creatures to dodge. Still others require using E.T.'s powers or switching to Elliot to progress. Some of these mazes do get quite tricky to figure out, but I don't think they're too difficult for the target audience of kids. The audio-video package is not as split between good and crap like the Cosmic Garden. The visuals aren't as detailed as the other one during gameplay, with smaller character sprites and fewer animation frames, but they do make sure you can clearly see what you're doing by keeping the views zoomed out enough to see plenty of the maze. On the flip side, the stills taken from the movie are some of the sharpest graphics I've seen on the 8-bit handheld. I was genuinely surprised at how clear they looked. Meanwhile, the music is much better than the audio torture of the Cosmic Garden, simple tunes that stay pleasant throughout. E.T. Escape from Planet Earth is an ideal E.T. game. It looks and sounds pleasant, it's simple to pick up and play, and there's a decent difficulty curve in the mazes with plenty of variety. The game can be easily found for about $10 online, and it's a nice little addition for the kids if you still have a working Game Boy Color or Advance. Now, the third Game Boy Color game is the hardest one to talk about. In fact, it's a stretch to even call it a game. It's the E.T. Digital Companion. It's primarily a program that turns the Game Boy Color into an E.T.-themed PDA. You start by entering your name, birthday, interests, all that happy horse shit. It does bug me that options for plugging in interests are very slim with no custom options. Why bother including an on-screen keyboard if you can't use it everywhere? There is also a calendar that's near useless given how old this cartridge is, and a place to plug in contacts. Seriously, why am I even talking about this? With the advent of smartphones, Palm Pilots went the way of the dodo. No one would care about watered-down PDA software for the Game Boy Color. Hell, even dankpods on YouTube who normally looks at shit like this wouldn't care. I'm only bothering because there are a few mini-games in the cool stuff section that I might as well look at. There's a bicycle race that's similar to the ET minigame in Universal Theme Park Adventure, except this one doesn't suck! Your goal is simply to get Elliot to the end of the course before time runs out while dodging various obstacles like road cones and tires. A simple diversion that works well for what it is. There are basic word scramble and tile moving puzzles that I don't need to describe. Everyone knows how those work. They're that basic. Same goes for the memory matching game, which everyone knows how to play. Really, the minigame I liked the most was the trivia game. The questions come in science and movie flavors, and some of the questions can get rather tough. There's also a virtual pet in the package, but I didn't care about virtual pets even when they were popular, let alone now. The ET Digital Companion is a relic. The minigames are the kinds of diversions you can find anywhere, and the PDA functions are done much better on your smartphone. Seriously, you can just download ET-themed wallpapers and sound effects to your smartphone and get the same result. This Game Boy Color cartridge isn't bad, but it's long past its relevance now. Well, now it's time to go up to 16-bit. This is ET the Extra-Terrestrial. This Game Boy Advance game is simply named after the movie. It's as if New Kid Co. wanted to tell everyone that the Game Boy Color games were just appetizers. Here's the main course. That would be fine, if the main course didn't make 3-day-old McDonald's look like a gourmet meal. The visual and audio package does take advantage of the added bits. ET looks and animates far better than the other games I've talked about, and the environments are just bursting with color. Not only has music evolved past that, but there's also plenty of pleasant ambiance that make you feel like you're in a quiet forest. It is a very pleasant looking and sounding game. How it plays is another matter. First, I have to give at least some props. The plot of the game hits many of the beats of the movie, including some moments like E.T. gathering plant specimens and even building the communicator. There is a lot of variety in the stages. Even though most of them are mazes or scavenger hunts, elements are mixed up to keep the game fresh. However, the mechanics bug the crap out of me. The controls are very slippery, especially in the vehicle sections. I lost all my patience trying to land the rescue craft. As pleasant as the visuals are, I wish they weren't zoomed in so much. Mazes become irritating to navigate when I can't see more of the surrounding area. Also, with so many chases, I lost count how many times a pursuer nailed me from just off screen simply because I couldn't see him until it was too late. It certainly doesn't help that E.T. is a total wimp. Everything under the sun can hurt him, even basic frogs and bugs, and he has no defensive moves. All he can do is run. He can find Reese's Pieces for health pickups, but that's it for help. The game got really annoying really quickly. Fortunately, there are passwords for continuing your game, or skipping ahead to see the other levels. E.T. on the Game Boy Advance had plenty going for it, but just found ways to screw up over and over again. The graphics were pleasant, and level variety is never a bad thing. However, slippery controls, mixed with making the title character a total wuss, made for a very annoying time. The game got so close to good only to foul up on the fundamentals. It's enough to make E.T.'s heart a lot dimmer. Now there's one last game to talk about. One last chance for the license to have any dignity in gaming. This is E.T. Interplanetary Mission on the original PlayStation. Now I'm not going to drag this one for releasing on the PS1 when the PS2 was already out. Thanks to the smaller redesign, the PS1 was still selling plenty after the PS2's launch. Also, plenty of budget titles were releasing for the system at that point. Besides, I can forgive it releasing on outdated hardware, as it is easily the best E.T. game by leaps and bounds. Conceptually, Interplanetary Mission is an expansion on Escape from Planet Earth. It's an isometric game revolving around navigating mazes. However, the puzzles in these mazes require E.T. to actually do stuff. What a novel idea! Actually doing stuff in his own game! He can heal and collect flowers for extra lives. He can use telekinesis to get items that are out of reach. He can actually stun enemies to make it easier to get past them or even blast them out of the way. E.T.'s not helpless here. It's a fucking Christmas miracle. There are multiple planets with plenty of levels to blast through, and the difficulty curve is just right, never getting too hard too quickly. Though the game shares the Game Boy Advance game's issue of being zoomed in so far that foes can easily get the drop on you from off screen, this is the best playing E.T. game out of all of them. The visuals are 32-bit. That's all I have to say. They definitely look like they came from the era of simple polygon models. However, the art design stays creative to ensure the game is still nice to look at. Alien foes have simple designs but not to the game's detriment, and the flower pickups are nice and colorful. Even E.T. himself looks pretty close to the way he should. The audio is minimal, but I have to give props to the developers for actually using the theme music. The only other game that did that was the 2600 game. How screwed up is that? E.T. Interplanetary Mission was the perfect way to round out this look at E.T. games. And what a ride this has been. We went from a failure rushed out the door for Christmas that's now unjustly blamed for nearly tanking the industry, to a last-ditch effort to justify spending absurd amounts of money on a license, to 4 portable games that were decent, outdated, annoying, or horrible, to ending with a fun game that made use of the license. I'm glad I was able to find at least one game with Hollywood's most lovable alien that I can wholeheartedly endorse. It can be found online for $10 to $20. If you can still play physical PS1 games in some way, whether it be on the original hardware or the PS2 or PS3, this is one specimen worth taking home. So that was my look at all the licensed E.T. games. And I'm exhausted. Have any questions, comments, or well wishes for putting myself through this? Drop them in the comments below or send them to that Twitter right there. Hell, if you want to give me a late Christmas gift, coffee would be nice. Next time I'm spending New Year's Day on the acid slopes of Amped 3. Yeah, a different kind of headache. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to spend it with me. And thanks for the entire year. I truly do appreciate it. Merry Christmas and game on.